I never expected my life to split down the middle on such an ordinary night. There wasn't a warning, no thunder in the sky, no crack in the walls. Just me, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through the news on my phone while the smell of roasted chicken still lingered in the air. My wife poured herself a glass of wine, leaned against the counter like she owned the world, and said it so casually that for a second I thought I'd misheard her. "I think we should try an open marriage." The words slid out of her mouth smoother than the Merlot she sipped, as if she'd rehearsed them in front of the mirror a dozen times. My heart didn't just skip, it stopped. I blinked at her, half expecting her to laugh, to admit it was some twisted joke. But she didn't. She just swirled her glass, watching the red liquid climb the edges, waiting for me to respond. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "An open marriage, huh?" My voice was calm, far calmer than the storm in my chest. My pulse hammered like a drum, my palms slick against the cool wood of the table. "Yes," she said, her tone bright, almost condescending, like she was explaining something simple to a child. "We've been married for a long time. Don't you think it would add excitement? We're adults, mature enough to handle it." She emphasized the word mature like it was a weapon, daring me to protest. Mature. That single word cut deeper than anything else she could have said. What she really meant was that if I objected, if I flinched at the thought of sharing her, then I was small, insecure, a man incapable of keeping up with her newfound sophistication. I chuckled lightly, though it felt more like choking. "Excitement, huh? Sounds progressive." My lips formed the words, but my insides boiled. She thought I would crumble. She thought I would beg. No, I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. She tilted her head, her glossy hair falling over one shoulder, eyes gleaming with something that wasn't love. Amusement, maybe. Triumph. "I'm glad you see it that way," she said. "I was worried you'd overreact." Overreact. Another blade slid between my ribs. So she'd expected this to hurt. She wanted it to. And suddenly, in the pit of my stomach, I knew. This wasn't some impulsive whim sparked by a magazine article or a drunken conversation with a friend. No, she already had someone in mind. The thought made bile rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down and met her gaze evenly. "You're right," I said, lifting my glass of water as though toasting her. "I can handle it." Her smile widened. Smug. She thought she'd won. Inside, though, something darker stirred. Suspicion. Rage. The kind of anger that simmers, slow and quiet, promising it will surface when the time is right. I studied her as she moved around the kitchen. The sway of her hips, the way her blouse clung just a little too tightly. She'd always been beautiful, but tonight she radiated something else. A confidence, a glow that wasn't for me. My wife had already stepped outside our marriage in her mind, and now she wanted permission to make it real. She set her glass down and walked over to me, resting a manicured hand on my shoulder. "This will be good for us," she whispered. "You'll see. We can explore. Have fun. Together or separately." The word separately lingered in the air like smoke. Her nails traced lightly down my arm, a gesture that once would have made me hard instantly. Tonight it felt calculated, a distraction. But my body still betrayed me. I felt the stir of desire, tangled with humiliation and fury. My wife was talking about sex with other men, and all I could think about was how her perfume wrapped around me, how her skin was warm under my shirt sleeve. I forced myself not to flinch, not to pull away. "If it's what you want," I murmured. Her lips brushed my cheek before she left the room, humming to herself like she'd just finished redecorating, not detonating the foundation of our marriage. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at the empty doorway, the half-drunk glass of wine, the shadows stretching long across the floor. My mind ran in circles, chasing the same bitter truth. She already had someone. Maybe it was a coworker. The late nights at the office suddenly made sense. Or maybe it was one of the men she always texted, claiming they were just friends. Whoever it was, he was the reason she could toss her grenade so casually, so sure of herself. She wanted me to roll over, to nod politely while she spread her legs for someone else. My jaw tightened. If she thought I would crumble, she was wrong. I wouldn't be the pitiful husband left in the dark while his wife giggled in someone else's bed. She wanted a game? Fine. But I wouldn't play the victim. As I sat there, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, I realized I wasn't just angry. I was awake. For years, maybe decades, I'd accepted things without question. But now my wife had opened a door she didn't understand. And behind my calm smile, I stepped through it, too, determined to find out the truth, determined to decide what to do with it. And maybe, just maybe, to take back the power she thought she'd stolen. If I had hoped her little proposal was just a passing fantasy, the kind of nonsense people throw out after too much wine, the days that followed crushed that illusion quickly. It wasn't even subtle. The transformation was immediate, like she had been waiting for my reluctant yes to finally unleash the version of herself she'd been hiding. Her phone, once left face up on the counter or tossed carelessly onto the couch, was now glued to her hand. Always buzzing, always lighting up, and always flipped screen down the second I walked into the room. She'd smile absently, mutter something about work, and vanish into another room. The word meeting became her favorite excuse, yet her perfume lingered too strongly when she returned. Not the soft vanilla scent she wore every day, but sharper, muskier, the kind that clung to her blouse and hair like someone else had pressed too close. I asked once, pretending to be curious rather than accusatory. New perfume. She shot me a look over her shoulder, eyes narrowed. It's just a sample. Why are you sniffing me like a jealous teenager? The jab was deliberate, a twist of the knife. I forced a shrug, but inside I catalogued every detail. The flushed cheeks, the slightly mussed hair, the faint mark on her collarbone she hadn't bothered to cover. Nights grew lonelier. She claimed exhaustion and fell asleep with her back to me. Or worse, she stayed out late and crawled into bed hours after I'd given up waiting. The sheets carried traces that weren't mine, an unfamiliar cologne, the faint scent of sweat mixed with sex. My stomach churned each time, but I kept my silence. For now, the hardest part wasn't just the humiliation, it was the way she twisted everything back on me. One evening, when I finally asked, "Are these meetings really about work?" she didn't hesitate. "God, you're insufferable sometimes," she snapped. "Do you hear yourself? You agreed to this. Now you want to police me? Maybe the problem isn't me, it's your insecurity." Her eyes flashed with contempt, and for a second, I wanted to grab her, shake her, demand the truth. But I didn't. I just nodded, the picture of calm. If she wanted to believe she'd broken me, let her. It was at the neighborhood barbecue where my quiet suspicions finally found confirmation. The sun was dipping low, kids ran wild across the lawn, and the smell of burgers and charcoal hung heavy in the air. She floated through the crowd with practiced ease, laughing too loudly at another man's jokes, brushing his arm just a second too long. My jaw clenched, but I kept my beer steady, smile frozen. Then I caught it. A pair of whispers behind me, two women huddled together near the drinks table. They thought they were out of earshot, but their voices carried. "Can you believe she had the nerve to ask for his permission after already lining it up?" one said. "I know," the other replied. "It's cruel, really. He has no idea." My blood went cold. The words hit harder than any punch could. Already lined it up. So I wasn't paranoid. She had arranged this before ever asking me. I forced my head to turn slowly, casually, pretending to scan the crowd. Their eyes darted away the second they realized I'd overheard, guilty as thieves. Humiliation burned in my chest, but beneath it was something sharper. Certainty. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd played me, turned our marriage into a stage for her performance while the whole neighborhood held tickets. Later that night, when she came home smelling like someone else's cologne again, she slipped into the bedroom with a sly smile. She peeled off her blouse in front of the mirror, humming to herself. My eyes followed her reflection, the curve of her body, the faint red marks on her skin that weren't mine. Desire tangled with rage until I wasn't sure if I wanted to drag her to the bed or demand whose hands had been on her. She caught me watching and smirked. "What? You could take advantage of this too, you know. I told you, we're free now." Free. The word was poison. She thought she'd liberated herself, but all she'd done was open a wound. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my eyes linger, made her think I was still under her spell. Inside, though, something hardened. My trust, already cracked, splintered completely that night. She wanted to believe she was in control, the queen moving pieces across the board. But I wasn't a pawn, and I sure as hell wasn't finished. As I lay awake beside her, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing, I made a silent promise. If she wanted a game, I'd learn the rules better than she ever could. And when the time came, I wouldn't just play, I'd win. The strange thing about betrayal is how quickly it becomes routine. The first lie stings. The first late night feels like a dagger to the ribs. The first whiff of perfume that isn't hers leaves you sick to your stomach. But eventually, the pain dulls into something colder, like scar tissue forming where flesh was once raw. I learned to wear my own mask. To the outside world, nothing had changed. I smiled at neighbors, asked about their kids, waved to the mailman, and cracked jokes at work like I hadn't just spent the night staring at the ceiling while my wife slipped into bed reeking of sex. I laughed when I needed to, played the part of the steady husband, the man who wasn't falling apart inside. She, on the other hand, reveled in her new freedom. It was almost theatrical. She dressed differently, skirts shorter, blouses tighter, as though she were 20 again and desperate for attention. She lingered at the mirror longer each morning, humming under her breath while she painted her lips a deeper red. Sometimes she'd catch me watching her and smirk, like she knew I could see the changes but was too weak to call her out. In public, she played the role of the modern, enlightened wife. At dinner with friends, she dropped little hints, carefully crafted phrases that made her sound worldly. "Marriage doesn't have to be a prison," she'd say with a smile, sipping her wine. "Two people can evolve together, if they're mature enough." The word mature always seemed aimed like a dart at me, though I never flinched. I just nodded along, feigning agreement, while inside I imagined the table flipping, glasses shattering, her smug expression finally wiped clean. Our friends noticed the distance, even if they didn't dare speak it aloud. They weren't blind. They saw her leaving gatherings early, phone buzzing in her purse, claiming she had an early meeting. They noticed my forced smiles, the way I excused her absences with too much ease. But nobody said anything. Nobody wanted to step into that minefield. Behind closed doors, the mask slipped only a little. We still talked about bills, groceries, family obligations. She still left her shoes by the door, still hummed while she cooked, still dropped laundry at the foot of our bed. But something fundamental had shifted. I was no longer her partner. I was her audience. She flaunted her independence with a kind of smug joy, as though she'd outgrown me. There were nights she would brush against me deliberately, as if daring me to want her. The scent of her skin, the way her blouse gaped just enough to reveal the swell of her breasts, it was all calculated. And my body betrayed me every time. Heat stirred in my chest, blood rushed south, and for a fleeting moment I wanted nothing more than to drag her against me, to remind her I wasn't invisible. But then I'd catch the glint in her eyes, the satisfaction of knowing she still had me on a leash, and I'd pull back. I wouldn't give her that. Not anymore. So I became an actor. My lines were simple, small talk, polite laughter, a calm nod here and there. I played my role so well that even she began to believe it. She thought she'd reduced me to a harmless shell of a husband, obedient, unthreatening, irrelevant. Inside, though, I was sharpening myself. Each smirk she gave, each night she came home smelling of someone else, each whispered rumor I caught from the corner of a room, it all hardened me. If she wanted me invisible, I would use it. If she thought I was powerless, I'd let her think it. Because while she paraded herself like a queen, I began to feel something shift deep inside me. Not just anger, not just humiliation, resolve. I stopped asking questions. I stopped caring about her excuses, her late nights, her sudden interest in fitness classes she never attended. Instead, I shrugged, smiled, and turned my attention inward. I started to notice how invisible I'd made myself. Yes, but also how invisible she had become to me. And that realization lit a strange fire. I wasn't broken. I wasn't helpless. I was awake. The mask I wore to the world wasn't just a cover anymore. It became armor. Every time she brushed past me with her smug little smile, I smiled back, calm and unbothered. Every time she left the house dressed for someone else, I kissed her cheek lightly, as though I couldn't care less. And I saw the cracks forming. She expected jealousy. She wanted the shouting, the accusations, the desperate pleas to stop. But when I gave her nothing, when I simply acted as though she no longer held the strings, she faltered. Not much, not yet, but enough for me to notice. I wasn't her victim. I wasn't her audience. I was becoming her mirror, calm, unreadable, and waiting. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't in months: control. It started with a text. Just one line, simple and out of the blue. "I don't agree with what she's doing to you. You don't deserve this. It was from her best friend, the woman who had been around for birthdays, Christmas dinners, barbecues in our backyard. The woman who had been at our wedding, smiling in every picture, raising a glass in our honor. Seeing her name light up my phone that late at night sent a flicker of something unexpected through me. Relief, maybe, or validation. Someone else saw it. Someone else understood. I stared at the message for a long time, thumb hovering over the screen. My wife slept beside me, her soft breathing steady, her phone clutched loosely in her hand like it was part of her body. I could smell faint traces of cologne on her hair, the evidence she didn't even bother to wash away anymore. For a moment, I considered ignoring the text, shoving it down the same way I shoved down everything else. But then my thumbs moved, almost on their own. Thank you. I was starting to think I was crazy. Her reply came instantly. You're not crazy. She's being selfish. I see it every time I look at her. I lay there in the dark, my chest tight, rereading her words until my eyes burned. No one had said that to me. Not once. Not my friends, who avoided the subject. Not my family, who stayed politely distant. And certainly not my wife, who made me feel like the fool every time I dared to question her. But here was the one person who should have been on her side, telling me I wasn't wrong to feel betrayed. That night, the messages kept coming. Short at first, then longer. She asked how I was holding up. I admitted I felt humiliated, like a prop in my own marriage. She told me she'd noticed the change in my wife, the way she gloated about her freedom, the way she dismissed me like I was nothing. You're not nothing, she wrote. You've always been the one steady thing in her life. She doesn't realize how much she's throwing away. I didn't realize until later how much I needed to hear those words. Over the next few days, the conversations grew longer. During lunch breaks at work, I'd find myself checking my phone, waiting for her messages. At night, after my wife slipped away on another meeting, I'd pour myself a drink and sit in the quiet, typing paragraphs I never thought I'd send. She never judged, never minimized what I felt. Instead, she listened. She saw me. One evening, she called. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, but steady. I just want you to know you're not alone in this. I care about you. I always have. Those words hit harder than I expected. For months, I'd been invisible, just a placeholder while my wife chased her thrills. But in that moment, with her best friend's voice in my ear, I felt seen. Wanted, even. It was dangerous, I knew. She belonged to my wife's circle, part of the world I was supposed to keep separate from my own bitterness. But the more we talked, the harder it became to draw the line. She asked about my day, about the little things no one else bothered to notice anymore. When I made her laugh, a real, unguarded laugh, I felt something stir inside me I thought I'd lost, the simple pleasure of being valued. And then came the slip. Late one night, after too many texts and too many drinks, she admitted, I've always admired you. The way you love her, the way you stayed loyal even when she didn't deserve it. Not many men would. Her words lingered long after the call ended. Admired me. Not pitted, not tolerated, admired. My chest tightened, heat rising in places I didn't expect. I knew I was crossing a line, even if only in thought. But once you feel wanted again, it's impossible to go back to invisibility. The next time I saw her was at a family gathering. She moved through the room with her usual quiet grace, but when her eyes met mine, I felt the weight of everything we hadn't said. A secret stretched between us, humming with electricity. When she hugged me goodbye, her hand lingered a second too long on my back. Her lips brushed close to my ear as she whispered, Take care of yourself. My wife stood only a few feet away, laughing with someone else, oblivious. I walked to the car that night feeling something I hadn't in months. Not just anger, not just humiliation, but anticipation. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wondered if maybe her game wouldn't end the way she thought. It was supposed to be just another night of talking. That's what I told myself as I pulled into her driveway, the porch light glowing like a quiet invitation. My wife was out, another late meeting that I no longer bothered to question, and I couldn't stomach another night alone with the silence. She'd texted me earlier, If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. I killed the engine, sat in the car for a long moment, and told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just going to sit with a friend, share a drink, maybe laugh for a little while. Nothing more. She opened the door before I could knock, her hair pulled back casually, a glass of wine already in her hand. You made it, she said, her smile soft, not pitying. Her porch was quiet, lit by string lights that cast everything in a warm, golden glow. We settled into the chairs, a bottle between us, the summer air heavy with the scent of cut grass. At first it was easy, safe. We talked about work, about neighbors, about the absurdity of pretending everything was normal. She had this way of listening that made the weight slide off my shoulders. But as the wine disappeared, the edges of our conversation sharpened. She leaned closer, her eyes steady on mine. You know, I've never understood her, she said. You've given her everything. Stability, love, loyalty. And she treats it like it's nothing. I swallowed hard, the words hitting too close. Maybe I made it too easy for her. No, she said firmly. You made it real. That's what she doesn't see. Her voice wavered, just barely, but it was enough to crack the air between us. I saw it then, the glint in her eyes, the hesitation quickly masked by another sip of wine. My chest tightened. I don't know what I'd do without these talks, I admitted. The words slipped out before I could stop them. She smiled, a sad little curve of her lips. Neither do I. Silence settled, thicker than the night around us. The cicadas hummed in the distance, and I became aware of how close we were sitting, how her knee brushed mine every time she shifted. The heat in my chest spread lower, coiling in places I hadn't felt alive in months. You've always been, she began, then stopped, biting her lip. Always been what? My voice came out rougher than I intended. Her eyes flicked to mine, then down to the bottle, then back up. Someone I admired. More than I probably should have. The confession hung between us, electric. I knew this was the moment where I should have laughed it off, changed the subject, saved us both. But I couldn't. My hand reached across the space almost on its own, brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around mine. The world narrowed. My breath came shallow, my heart hammering as if trying to break free from my chest. We sat like that, hands locked, staring at each other. The air grew heavy, and then, slowly, inevitably, I leaned in. Our lips touched, hesitant at first, a question neither of us dared to ask aloud. But when she didn't retreat, when her hand slipped to the back of my neck and pulled me closer, the kiss deepened. Months of bottled frustration, of humiliation and longing, poured out in that single moment. Her lips were warm, hungry, tasting of wine and something sweeter. I pulled back for just a second, guilt stabbing at me. We shouldn't. I know, she whispered, her breath brushing my skin. But I don't care. That broke me. I kissed her again, harder this time, desperate and unrestrained. My hands slid to her waist, feeling the curve of her body, the heat of her skin beneath the thin fabric of her blouse. She gasped softly against my mouth, and the sound sent a rush of blood straight through me. Every thought screamed that this was wrong, reckless, unforgivable. But my body betrayed me, aching for the touch I'd been denied for too long. Her nails dug lightly into my shoulder, and I shivered. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, her forehead rested against mine. We crossed a line, she said softly. Yeah, I whispered. But for the first time in months, I feel alive. She closed her eyes, her lips brushing mine once more, tender this time, almost reverent. You deserve to feel alive, she murmured. We didn't go further that night. Maybe because we both knew once we did, there'd be no turning back. But as I drove home, her taste still on my lips, her touch still burning on my skin, I knew there was no undoing what had happened. The line was crossed, and part of me didn't regret it. Rumors have a way of moving faster than truth. One slip of a whisper, one knowing glance, and suddenly everyone seems to know more than they should. I felt it in the way people looked at me at gatherings, curious, speculative, as though they were waiting for me to break. And it wasn't long before she came to me, her younger sister. She caught me alone one afternoon, after a family lunch at her parents' house. My wife had already disappeared with some flimsy excuse about errands, leaving me stranded with relatives who didn't know half the story. I'd stepped outside, desperate for air, when she appeared beside me. Can we talk? She asked. Her voice was low, serious, carrying a weight I wasn't used to hearing from her. We walked a few steps away, out of earshot. She crossed her arms, her eyes sharp and unflinching. I've been hearing things, she said. About you. About her best friend. My stomach tightened, though I forced my face to stay neutral. People say a lot of things. Don't play dumb, she snapped. You know what I mean. Is it true? Her bluntness caught me off guard. She wasn't her sister. She didn't dance around words, didn't sugarcoat. She wanted the truth laid bare, even if it cut. I sighed. Why does it matter to you? Because it's reckless, she shot back. Because as much as my sister doesn't deserve your loyalty anymore, what you're doing will only make things worse. If she finds out, she trailed off, shaking her head. It'll explode. And you'll be the one everyone blames. Her words stung because they weren't wrong. I had already crossed a line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. But something about her tone, half warning, half something else, made me bristle. You think I don't know that? I said, my voice rough. You think I asked for any of this? She tore our marriage apart and left me bleeding. And now I'm the one being reckless? Her eyes softened, just for a second. I'm not excusing her. God knows I don't respect what she's done. But don't make yourself into her equal. You deserve better than being dragged down into her mess. That last sentence lingered, echoing in the air between us. You deserve better. The words hit differently coming from her. Maybe because I knew how little she thought of her sister these days. Maybe because there was something unspoken beneath them, something heavier. Our eyes locked, and suddenly the argument shifted. The tension between us wasn't just anger. It was something else, something dangerous. You really don't respect her, do you? I asked quietly. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. No, I think she's selfish. Always has been. And now she's proving it. The bitterness in her voice was raw, unguarded. It made her vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. I should have left it there, walked away, let the moment fade. But the air was thick, charged, and I felt myself stepping closer instead of back. You think I deserve better, I said softly. What about you? What do you deserve? Her breath caught, her lips parting as though she hadn't expected the question. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she whispered, almost too low to hear, more than watching her destroy everything. More than watching her treat you like you're nothing. The words snapped something in me. I don't know if it was the wine from lunch still warming my blood, or the loneliness that had eaten me alive for months, or the undeniable pull in her eyes. But suddenly, we weren't just arguing. I leaned in. Or maybe she did. I'll never know. But our mouths collided, fierce and unrelenting, the kiss tasting of anger and longing and everything forbidden. Her hands clutched at my shirt, pulling me closer, while mine gripped her waist like I was drowning, and she was the only thing keeping me afloat. It was wrong. Every cell in my body knew it. But it felt electric, intoxicating. Her lips were softer than I'd imagined. Her body pressed tight against mine, heat flooding every nerve. When her tongue brushed mine, I groaned. The sound ripped from somewhere deep and desperate. We broke apart only when footsteps echoed nearby, reminding us where we were. She stepped back, her chest heaving, eyes wide with shock. This can't happen, she whispered, though her voice trembled. I nodded, though my body screamed otherwise. I know. But as she turned and walked quickly back toward the house, her hands shaking, I could still feel her taste on my lips, the imprint of her body against mine. And I knew, no matter how much we denied it, the line wasn't just crossed. It was obliterated. I'd thought things were complicated before. But now, with her best friend and her sister tangled up in my life, complication didn't even begin to cover it. It was dangerous, like standing in the middle of a room full of glass while everyone else held stones. One wrong step, and everything would shatter. Her best friend was steady. Every time I saw her, every time we talked, it was like breathing again after months underwater. She knew me, understood me in ways my wife never had. There was warmth in her eyes, comfort in her smile, and something that felt dangerously close to devotion. But her sister, she was different. With her, it wasn't comfort. It was fire. Guilt and desire wrapped so tightly together that I couldn't separate them anymore. One glance, one accidental touch, and my body lit up like it had been starved for years. She made me reckless, alive in a way I hadn't been in decades. And I was caught between them. Nights became a blur of stolen moments. A late call with the best friend, her voice soothing in the quiet hours, telling me she believed in me, that I was more than what my wife had reduced me to. Then a chance encounter with the sister, her words sharp, her presence electric, the memory of our kiss still lingering every time our eyes met. It unsettled me, How clearly I could see the difference. One woman offered me steady ground, a place to rebuild. The other set fire to everything I touched. The worst part was how easily it all blended into the mask I still wore for my wife. Around her, I played calm, indifferent. When she came home late, smelling of cologne and cheap perfume, I didn't ask questions anymore. I smiled. I shrugged. I acted like her freedom didn't bother me. And the more I acted, the more uneasy she became. "Why don't you care where I've been?" she asked one night, suspicion in her voice. I gave her a slow smile, sipping my drink. "Why should I? You're free, remember?" Her eyes narrowed. She wanted a fight, wanted the satisfaction of knowing she still had the power to wound me. But I denied her that. And in her frustration, I saw cracks forming in her confidence. Meanwhile, the triangle pulled tighter. One evening, her best friend invited me over again. We sat close on the couch, the tension between us no longer just unspoken but undeniable. She placed her hand on mine, her thumb tracing small circles on my skin. "You don't have to go through this alone," she said softly. The urge to kiss her again nearly broke me. But before I could, my phone buzzed. A message. From her sister. "We need to talk. Now." I froze, the air thick in my lungs. Two women, both tied to my wife, both tied now to me in ways that defied logic or morality. One steady, one dangerous. And me, caught between them, my heart split down the middle. Later that week, the three of us ended up in the same room. Unplanned, but inevitable. A family gathering, laughter and chatter all around. But beneath the surface, I could feel the tension like a live wire. The best friend's gaze lingered on me too long. The sister's eyes flicked to mine, quick and charged. And my wife, oblivious or willfully blind, basked in her own spotlight. I realized then how fragile it all was. How one slip, one wrong word, one careless look, and everything would unravel. That night, lying awake in bed beside my wife, I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Which one did I really want? The sister set my blood on fire, yes. She gave me the thrill I thought I'd lost forever. But the best friend, she gave me something deeper. Consistency, loyalty, a kind of quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. The thought terrified me more than anything my wife had done. Because I knew, eventually, I would have to choose. And no matter which choice I made, the fallout would be catastrophic. For now, though, I kept my mask in place, played my part, and pretended I wasn't walking a razor's edge. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. And the battlefield was my own heart. It was almost funny how quickly she noticed the change. For months, she'd strutted around like a queen, certain I was the powerless husband left in her shadow. She thought she could come home late, smelling of sex, and still find me waiting with desperation in my eyes. But something shifted inside me after crossing lines with her best friend, after tasting the heat of her sister's lips. Suddenly, I wasn't the same man she thought she could control, and that unnerved her more than anything else. She came home late one evening, brushing past me with that same smug smile. But when I didn't ask where she'd been, didn't even bother glancing up from my glass of whiskey, I saw her falter. Just for a second. "You're quiet," she said, slipping off her heels. "Am I?" I asked, swirling the amber liquid. "Maybe I don't have anything to say." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face for cracks. "You're not upset?" I smiled faintly. "About what?" That silence stretched long, heavy. She wanted me to snap, to rage, to prove that I still cared enough to bleed. But I didn't give her that. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. The days that followed only deepened the shift. I no longer flinched when her phone buzzed with late-night messages. I no longer pressed when she mentioned meetings or girls' nights. Instead, I shrugged, kissed her cheek lightly, and let her leave. The freedom she demanded so confidently suddenly seemed like a leash wrapped around her own throat. She tested me. One night, she walked into the bedroom in lingerie, the kind she hadn't worn in years. I looked up, took in the sight of her curves framed in lace, the faint perfume clinging to her skin. My body reacted instinctively, heat coiling low, but I didn't let it show. "You don't like what you see?" she asked, posing in the doorway like a seductress. I gave her a slow once-over, then turned back to the book in my hands. "You look fine." Her face flickered, a crack in the mask she tried to hold. Fine wasn't the reaction she wanted. She wanted hunger, desperation, jealousy. But I gave her nothing. At a dinner with friends, she tried again. She laughed louder than usual, touched the arm of another man at the table a little too often. Normally, the old me would have burned inside, holding my smile like a shield while every nerve screamed betrayal. But this time, I simply leaned back, sipped my wine, and joined another conversation. I didn't even look at her. That night, as we drove home, she finally snapped. "What's wrong with you?" she demanded, her voice sharp in the dark car. "Nothing," I said calmly, eyes on the road. "You don't ask questions anymore. You don't care what I do. You don't even look at me." I almost laughed. "Isn't that what you wanted? Freedom?" She bit her lip, frustration flashing across her face. "You're hiding something." Her words sent a chill through me. She wasn't wrong, though she didn't know what. She could sense it. The distance, the calm indifference that wasn't feigned anymore. What she didn't know was that while she was busy chasing thrills, I was finding my own kind of power elsewhere. I didn't answer her accusation. I let silence fill the car, let her stew in her own suspicions. And in that silence, I realized the tables were turning. For the first time, she wasn't sure of her hold on me. At home, she paced the living room while I poured myself another drink. "You're different," she said finally, her voice quieter now, almost uneasy. I shrugged. Maybe I just got used to things. The truth was, I had. I'd gotten used to her lies, her games, her betrayals. And in getting used to them, I'd stripped them of their power. She couldn't wound me anymore because I no longer cared to bleed for her. But she didn't need to know that the real reason I'd changed was because I wasn't invisible anymore. Because two other women, her best friend and her own sister, saw me in ways she never had. That night, lying in bed beside her, I heard her breathing shift. It wasn't steady with sleep. It was shallow, restless. She was awake, turning thoughts over in her head, trying to puzzle out the man beside her. And for once, I smiled in the dark. The cracks in our marriage weren't just visible now. They were widening. And she could feel it. The queen wasn't as untouchable as she thought. It happened faster than I expected. Secrets always do. You think you can control them, keep them tucked neatly behind locked doors, but eventually they claw their way out, demanding light. Mine came crashing down on a night that should have been routine. It started with her best friend. She'd grown tired of hiding, tired of watching me get trampled, tired of keeping quiet while my wife strutted through life with her smug little grin. The confrontation happened in our living room, right in front of my wife, when the tension that had been building for months finally boiled over. "You don't get to act like he's the problem," her best friend snapped. "You've been humiliating him for months, and you know it." My wife froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. "Excuse me." "You heard me," her friend said, standing her ground. "You think your little games make you powerful, but all you've done is show everyone how selfish you are. You don't deserve him." The silence that followed was suffocating. My wife's eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits. "Whose side are you on?" she demanded. "His," her friend said simply. I should have spoken, should have stepped in, but I couldn't. My chest was tight, my throat dry. Hearing those words, loyalty, finally spoken aloud, was like air after drowning. My wife's face turned red, fury burning through her mask, but before she could unleash it, her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, desperate for a distraction, and stormed out of the room. I thought that was the explosion. I thought the worst had already happened. But the real devastation came later. It was her sister who lit the match. She'd cornered me a few days after the confrontation, unable to hold back any longer. The tension between us was unbearable, our stolen kiss replaying in my mind every time I saw her. And one evening, when I was too tired to resist, it happened again. One kiss turned into two, then into hands gripping clothes, breathless whispers, a moment of weakness that spiraled into something undeniable. And of course, that was the moment my wife walked in. The door slammed behind her, echoing like a gunshot. I froze, my lips still inches from her sister's, both of us wide-eyed and guilty. My wife's face was a mask of horror, betrayal, and rage all tangled together. "You," she hissed, pointing a shaking finger at me. Then her gaze snapped to her sister. "And you?" Her sister stumbled back, her voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like. Don't lie to me," my wife screamed, her voice cracking. "Not only him, but you? My own sister?" The room spun around me, the walls closing in. My wife's best friend had chosen me. Now her sister had crossed the line, too. And suddenly the betrayal wasn't just hers, it was mine. You've ruined everything, she spat, tears shining in her eyes though her voice was venom. Both of you. Do you have any idea what you've done? Her sister tried to speak, but my wife cut her off with a furious glare. Don't. Just don't. You're dead to me. Her words sliced through the air, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The sound of her car screeching out of the driveway followed seconds later, leaving me and her sister standing in the wreckage of what we'd just destroyed. For a long time, neither of us spoke. My heart pounded so loudly it felt like it would burst through my chest. Her sister finally whispered, her voice raw. It was bound to happen sooner or later. Maybe she was right. Maybe the lies and betrayals had been piling up for too long. But as I looked at her, trembling, guilt and desire still tangled between us, I realized the truth. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was war. And the battlefield wasn't just my marriage. It was her family, her friendships, every connection she thought she controlled. I sank into the chair, head in my hands. For months, I'd let her play her game, humiliate me, treat me like a pawn. But now, the board had flipped. Her best friend stood with me. Her sister had kissed me. And my wife, the woman who thought she held all the power, was finally the one left betrayed. The revelation wasn't just hers. It was mine. And it was only the beginning of the fallout. The days after the revelation were like walking through a storm with no shelter. Every direction I turned, lightning flashed, thunder cracked, and the ground beneath me threatened to split. The fallout wasn't quiet. It was brutal, loud, impossible to ignore. Word spread faster than I could have imagined. Families like hers, like mine, always carried whispers, and now the whispers were screams. Friends who once smiled at us across dinner tables avoided eye contact. Invitations dried up overnight. And the ones who did speak to us only did so to feed their curiosity. Her anger, though, was the loudest. She lashed out at everyone. Me, her sister, her best friend. She called me a coward, a traitor, a weak man who'd hidden behind silence only to stab her in the back. At first, I tried to argue, to remind her that she was the one who had ripped our vows to pieces long before I'd ever kissed another woman. But eventually, I stopped. What was the point? She wasn't fighting for our marriage. She was fighting for her pride. Her sister disappeared for a while after that night. Guilt had sunk its claws into her, dragging her into silence. I didn't blame her. The weight of what we'd done was heavy, forbidden in ways that burned deeper than anything else. But her absence stung more than I wanted to admit. The best friend, though, she stayed. She didn't flinch when my wife screamed at her, didn't retreat when friends accused her of betrayal. She stood beside me, steady as ever, her loyalty carved deep. In her presence, the noise quieted, the storm dulled. She listened, she held my hand. She reminded me that I wasn't just the villain in this story. That mattered more than I could say. One evening, when the chaos had reached a fever pitch, she came to me. We sat together on her couch, the air heavy with unspoken words. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. I thought about my wife's fury, her sister's guilt, the wreckage of friendships now reduced to ash. I thought about the way my life had split down the middle, the way I'd crossed lines I could never uncross. And then I thought about her hand in mine, her voice telling me I wasn't alone, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me. "No," I said finally. "I don't." She nodded, squeezing my hand. "Then neither do I." It should have comforted me more than it did. But even as I sat there, warmth flooding through me, I couldn't shake the weight of the destruction around us. Every family dinner had turned hostile, every gathering poisoned with tension. My wife stood isolated, furious at the disloyalty that had surrounded her, yet too blind to see that she had caused it. Her lover, whoever he was long gone. Her friends avoided her, her own sister couldn't look her in the eye, and I was no longer hers to command. Still, she fought. Every time we crossed paths, she threw words like daggers. "You think you've won? You think they care about you? You're nothing without me." But her voice cracked now, the venom diluted by fear. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I had nothing left to prove. One night, after another screaming match that ended with her storming out, I sat in the quiet and realized something profound. I wasn't broken anymore. Yes, I was scarred, twisted by betrayal and desire and choices I could never take back. But I was no longer her victim. I was standing, breathing, even smiling. And it wasn't because I destroyed her. It was because, through the wreckage, someone had chosen to stay with me. Her best friend had seen me. Not the mask, not the invisible husband, but me. She'd stayed when everyone else pulled away. That kind of loyalty couldn't be ignored. The fallout was far from over. Family still whispered, friends still judged, and my wife still plotted her next move. But as I sat there with her best friend's hand resting in mine, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. In the weeks that followed, the dust didn't settle so much as rearrange itself into new patterns. My wife, once so confident, stood alone. The lover she'd flaunted vanished as quickly as he'd appeared, unwilling to stay for the wreckage he helped create. The friends who had cheered her on at first now kept their distance, whispers trailing behind her like shadows. And her sister, too torn between guilt and shame, retreated into silence, choosing absence over confrontation. She'd thought opening the marriage would crown her queen of the board. Instead, she stood on an empty throne, clutching at pieces that no longer fit together. And me? I wasn't the same man she thought she'd broken. At first, I still wore the mask of indifference, but somewhere along the way, I realized it wasn't a mask anymore. I didn't feel the same searing jealousy, the same desperate need for her to see me. I looked at her, and all I felt was distance. The bond we once had been severed beyond repair, and she was the one who had cut it. The irony was almost poetic. In chasing her freedom, she'd lost everything. And in losing her, I had found someone who truly saw me. Her best friend never wavered. Through the chaos, the screaming, the whispered accusations at gatherings, she stood beside me. When I felt the weight of judgment pressing in, she reached for my hand. When my wife spat venom in public, she calmly told her to stop. That quiet, unwavering loyalty cut deeper than any grand declaration. It was real, solid. One evening, we sat together on her porch, the same place where it had all begun. The air was cool, the night quiet except for the hum of crickets. She poured me a glass of wine, her fingers brushing mine, and smiled that small, steady smile that had become my anchor. "Do you ever wish it had gone differently?" she asked softly. I thought about it. About the years of marriage, the laughter that used to fill my home, the nights when I truly believed forever was ours. I thought about how easily it had all unraveled with one proposal, one smug smile, one whispered maturity. "No," I said finally. "I don't. Because if it had, I wouldn't be here with you." Her eyes softened, and she leaned in, kissing me slowly, deeply, with none of the hesitation of that first night. It wasn't a kiss stolen in guilt or desperation. It was deliberate, chosen. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. Then I'm glad, too. In that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. My wife, once the puppet master, was left alone in the ruins of her choices. Her sister had vanished into the background, unable to face what she'd done. And here I was, sitting with the woman who had chosen me, not out of convenience, not out of rebellion, but because she saw me for who I was. I hadn't just survived her little game. I had won it in a way she never imagined. Later that week, I ran into my wife in town. She stood by her car, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but I could see the wear in her face. She tried to sneer, to toss some bitter remark my way, but the words faltered. For the first time, she looked small, alone. I nodded politely, offered her no more than that, and walked on. That was the moment I knew she had nothing left to take from me. The tables had turned completely. She was isolated, clinging to ashes. And I was no longer her victim, no longer her pawn. I was free. And more than that, I wasn't walking forward alone. Her best friend's hand found mine later that night as we lay together. The warmth of her body against mine, the quiet certainty of her presence filling the space where pain used to live. For the first time in a long time, I felt not just desired, but understood. It wasn't revenge anymore. It wasn't survival. It was choice. And I chose her.